everybody, and welcome to my first ever YouTube video, I guess. If you don't know me, my name is Viv, and I own a lot of books, and I'm getting to reading all of them. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the Sarah J. Maas universe and what order I think would be best to read all her books. Let's get started with the first book of the Sarah J. Maas universe, I would say. I wouldn't even call it part of her universe. I have not read this book, so I can't tell you much about it, but it is the Catwoman book that is part of the DC series that she, I think, wrote for DC. That book has nothing to do with all of her other books. There's no fairies in it, I guess, I believe. I think so, at least. But yeah, so I have no idea, and you can read this book completely separate because it's not in any way tied into the other books. And now let's get started with the actual books that I will talk to you about. I would actually advise you to start with the Throne of Glass series. This is a lot. All the Sarah J. Maas books are a lot. If you do decide to like a reading marathon with her books, you're gonna be at it for a while because these books are also thick and it's so heavy, but I would actually not advise you to read them in this order. So let me go through it book by book. Throne of Glass is the story of Selena. She is an assassin. She is an assassin. She is trained to kill, and she works for an assassin's guild, but there is a lot of treason going on, and so she is thrown into like a big prison, and she comes out of this prison. She kills a lot of people, and she is chosen to participate into being the royal assassin. This is like sort of her journey through that. The series progresses a lot, but I'm not going to spoil any of this, so this is just what the first book is about, and then the rest of the series goes on, and there's a lot of battles and a lot of characters, and there's a lot of plot lines that go on. So the first book starts with just one plot line, and then they progress and they get more, and there's multiple POVs later on, but the first book is just Selena. So this order that I'm going to tell you is just my personal reading preference, so I'm going to get started with this. Firstly, I would advise you to start with The Assassin's Blade. The Assassin's Blade is the prequel that was actually written after Heir of Fire, but I would advise you to start with this just because the reading in Throne of Glass is a little dodgy in the beginning, because the books were written when Sarah J. Maas was very, very young. She was I think 16, 17, and so it's a little faulty at sometimes, and it feels like it was written by a teenager, like just the first book, maybe the second book, which I don't mind. I've read a lot of Wattpad fanfiction, so I think I can get it, and it's sort of like the prequel. It's the story of how Throne of Glass even came to happen. So these are 4 little short novellas of Selena's journey of becoming who she is in the first book. I would actually advise you to read this before Throne of Glass. You can also read it after Throne of Glass, after Crown of Midnight, or after Heir of Fire, but please read it before reading Queen of Shadows. So then the second book is Throne of Glass. This is the beginning of the series. It's where Selena is introduced to the court. She's introduced to a few of the main characters, and then you go on with the second book of the series, which is Crown of Midnight. Crown of Midnight is, in my opinion, one of my favorites. I loved Crown of Midnight a lot. I'm not going to tell you what these are about, just not in order not to spoil you for anything, but this is incredible, and I enjoyed it a lot. After Crown of Midnight, there is Heir of Fire. Heir of Fire was also very good. I like this whole series. I basically like all her books. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to tell you about these because they're all good. And I don't want to spoil you. Then comes Queen of Shadows. Queen of Shadows is one of my favorites of this series. It's just great, and there's plot twists and plot twists that you just don't see them coming, and then they're here, and then you're frustrated. Now comes the tricky part. It's time for Tower of Dawn and Empire of Storms. So I read Tower of Dawn after reading Empire of Storms, which was the biggest mistake I could have made, possibly. Somebody's watering the plants outside. Back to these two books. So the biggest mistake that I could have made was reading Tower of Dawn after Empire of Storms, because Empire of Storms has the biggest cliffhanger in like the history of cliffhangers, and for the Sarah J. Maas universe that says something, because she loves cliffhangers and I hate them. I love them, but I hate them. I'm sorry, doesn't make sense. What I've heard a lot of people do, and what I think is really clever, is reading them simultaneously. So just reading like a chapter of Tower of Dawn and reading a chapter of Empire of Storms. So Tower of Dawn is again like sort of a collection of little novellas. They're about Call. I would call him that. I'm not sure how to pronounce the names. If I mess up any of the names, I am truly sorry. Please don't come at me. It just makes sense to read them simultaneously. That way you don't have to like suffer through in the entirety of Tower of Dawn after this big cliffhanger before you read the last book of the series. Kingdom of Ash. Kingdom of Ash is a lot. Let me check. This has 967 pages full of basically just the biggest and baddest end battle you can think of. So this is what you read last in the Throne of Glass series. I can't really tell you what it's about because it's the last book and I'm not going to spoil you. But yeah, I think that was the entirety of the Throne of Glass series, and we will go on to the ACOTAR series next. So the first thing I have to tell you about my ACOTAR books is that I have the A Touch of Magic dust jackets for the entire series, so you will see these beautiful dust jackets all the time, and not the original dust jackets they came in, because I just think these are a lot more beautiful. So ACOTAR is about Feyre, who is the youngest sister of 3 in her family, and her mother died, and when her mother died she told her that Feyre had to protect and provide for her family because she is capable of that. She can hunt, and so she goes into the forest and it's winter and they don't have anything to eat, and it's like her last chance to like keep her family alive. So she goes there and she kills a wolf. She is immediately worried, what if this isn't a wolf, what it's a fairy? And turns out all her suspicions were right, because later a big beast knocks on her door and tells her, okay, you've killed a fairy, now you have to pay the price and you have to come to the fairy world and like sort of be my prisoner. I am really passionate about these books. Maybe not the first one for reasons, if you know, but the second to like the last one, they're all perfect. So I will tell you the order in which to read them. The first book is A Court of Thorns and Roses, short ACOTAR. It's the first book in the series. It's the start. Everything happens here. It's the first one. Second book is A Court of Mist and Fury. This is, again, a little chunkier, but this is my personal favorite in the series. The romance in this book is amazing. The relationships are amazing. The found family trope in this book specifically just makes me incredibly happy. Next, we have A Court of Wings and Ruin, which is a very important book in the series. It's not my favorite. It's very important for like character development and all that sort of stuff, but it's not my personal favorite. Let's just say that. Next, we have the novella A Court of Frost and Starlight. So it's like book 3.5 in the series. It's just that after everything that happens in A Court of Wings and Ruin, this book happens. It's just sort of like organizing everything and what happens if there's no real issues in the world. This is, I think, the book that you don't necessarily need to read. I would still advise you to read this because this still helps you understand everything better. It's also really thin, so it's just fun, but it's not the best book in the series just because it doesn't have like this intricate plot line and there's not a lot of things that are going on. And then the last book, which I know is a lot of people's favorites, is A Court of Silver Flames. So with A Court of Silver Flames, This is a book that is written out of the perspective of Feyre's sister, like the eldest sister, which is Nesta. So we have Nesta right here. This is one of my favorite covers. So this cover of, like, the special cover, like dust jacket, is so stunning, and I can't not look at it and be like, oh, but the book itself, I loved it. I loved it. So many things happen, but you can see it. It is, again, really, really thick. Let me see. Okay, it's 775 pages long. There's just a lot going on here. There's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of great relationships again, but I might be the only one who thinks this, but I just, still, after reading this, Nesta is not my favorite character, and I thought that there were a lot of infuriating subplots in this, and a lot of things that made me a little angry at, like, just because there were tropes that I don't like. This is still a great book, but it's just not my favorite of the series. But maybe it's yours, and that's okay. I think that the Crescent City series is sort of self-explanatory in, like, the reading manner. But we do start with House of Earth and Blood. House of Earth and Blood is about Bryce, and a lot of horrible, horrible things happen in Bryce's life. And she is charged with investigating one of these horrible things, and just 2 years after it happened. And she does so together with Hunt. Hunt is a fallen angel who can create lightning with his hands, and they work for, like, the city government in order to, like, figure out this case. And even though that these books are, like, somewhat really, really slow-paced, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like there's a lot of sexual tension and stuff, so I just love these books so much. Now that we've talked a lot about House of Earth and Blood, let's go on to the second book of the series. So House of Sky and Breath is obviously the sequel to House of Earth and Blood. It was incredible. It is highly annotated by me, and I just love this book as well. It's the relationship and the suffering in this book is just so real, and the cliffhanger is killing me. So this book has, in my opinion, one of the worst cliffhangers ever created, and I have to suffer for a long time because it's now September. It's like the beginning of September. I think it's September 11th today. And Sarah J. Maas has, like, she said that she's currently writing the 3rd Crescent City book. And I don't know how I'm supposed to survive for this long, but I will. I will suffer through this. Okay, so I will now just give you a quick little, like, side note thing about the books. So technically the Throne of Glass series and the ACOTAR series are labeled as YA books, whereas Crescent City is labeled as a new adult book. So this is not for teenagers. Like, it's meant for adults because Bryce is obviously a lot older than the other main characters. Although I would say that I wouldn't actually advise anybody, like, below the age of, like, 15 to read the books. Like, they contain mature content, they contain a lot of mature smut scenes, and I would say that you can read Throne of Glass, and you can read ACOTAR as a teenager, but every other book in these series, like, okay, no, maybe you can read until, like, Heir of Fire in the Throne of Glass series, but everything that comes after that, I would say, is meant for a more mature audience. So I'm not talking about the Crescent City books. I have seen them in my bookstore in, like, the teens section a lot, and I just no, they don't belong there. And my bookstore has A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of Silver Flames in the teens section, which is not where they belong. These are clearly meant for a mature audience and not for teens. So yeah, I think that was everything that I had to tell you about the Sarah J. Maas universe. I hope it helped you a little bit, and I will see you next time.